Hello, Internet, and welcome to my review for Fairy Tail episode 289, Mavis and Zareth. When we last left off, Team Natsu and Mest had rescued Makarov and were trying to escape Alvarez, but were chased by Agil. Agil, I'm about to say Alvarez there, that's not the word. And when all hope seemed lost, they were about to be swallowed up in Agil's sand. Loxus came in clutch, shooting down lightning, helping the end with a last-ditch teleportation from Mess. We're able to teleport onto the waiting Christina, the Blue Pegasus flying ship that Loxus had commandeered, or being a member of Blue Pegasus, I guess he had access to. I don't know. And then they all went back to the guilds for a bit of relaxation before the war. Then Makarov and Mavis came to tell them the true history of Fairy Tail. So yeah, before we go any further into the review, just a reminder, I have my Winter 2019 anime review straw poll in the description down below. Please go fill that out. Let me know what you want to see next season on the channel. Right now it's looking like Neverland is the top choice, but Promise Neverland, But if you have another option, go put it down there. If you want Neverland to definitely win, vote for it some more. But yeah, moving on to the episode itself. So going into this episode, I was in the manga. Fairy Tail Zero was a separate series from the manga. It did not. It was not like an arc of the manga. There was a full separate Zero manga. And then when the manga had to tell the continuation of Zero, it kind of did a quick recap of Zero. And I was kind of curious how the anime would adapt that recap, just because Zero was a natural part of the anime, not a side manga that it's possible to have missed. But they just played it straight, and given that it's been, almost 3 years now since Zero, it makes sense. It's been a long time since we've seen that material, and so it makes sense to kind of go back and make sure we remember before we go into the aftermath of that. And what an aftermath we get. So the first thing we get is in the middle of some conflict known as the Second Trade War. So we briefly saw Mavis's analytical skills during the final day of the Grand Magic Games, as she had this whole plan planned out way back then. But besides that, Mavis doesn't really get to do a lot of tacticianing, which is kind of odd because her epithet is the Fairy Tactician. So to see her never get to use that name and never to see her be a tactician has always been kind of odd. So it's nice to see her analytical skills in action for once. It worked. It was a good little scene. Then one day she's kind of that's really all we get of the war. We get a quick mention that she's a little concerned about how many people are dying. Then the war ends, and 6 years pass, and Mavis is kind of going out on a walk, I think, and she just runs into Zareth, who at this point she does not know is Zareth. He's just the helpful guy who taught her magic going into the Battle for Magnolia at the end of Zero. But she starts talking with Zareth, the first time they've seen each other in a decade at this point. And Zareth is so blasé about his status as basically Wizard Satan. He's like, oh yeah, I'm Zareth, by the way. And she's like, what? You're that awful wizard who killed all those people? That's wild! You don't seem like that kind of guy. And sure, he didn't tell her when they first met, but he still does tell her eventually. And I don't know, if I were Zareth, I would want to keep that stuff under wraps. Though maybe it's for the best that he... I know why. It's because when he saw her unaging, I think he probably suspected that she had the curse of Ankh-Saram. Maybe it was a cruel wish, wanting someone like him in the world. But maybe he just knew instinctively because he's been through that. And so, in order to help her get through having the curse of Ankh-Saram, he tells her, yeah, I'm Zareth, I have this curse, I'm unaging, and you're unaging too, and you're dealing with the same thing as me. And if you were just some guy who taught her magic, it would be a little bit harder to take that, but hearing that from Zareth, the immortal, 300-year-old super wizard, is a little bit easier to take. And that leads us to the first of Mavis's 3 big tragedies tonight. When she used the unperfected law, she judged who lived and who died, which is the purview of Anxaram, the god of life and death. And as a result, she was afflicted with Anxaram's curse, like Zareth was back in his episode. And so the way the show ties it into law has always kind of confused me because there isn't that. So when we were first introduced to Mavis's time being stopped or her unagingness, we were told it was because law was imperfect, and as a side effect of using the imperfect spell, her time stopped. But now we know it has nothing to do with the quality of the law. It has to do with the law itself. Because law judges who lives and who dies, using law, using law is what caused Angstrom to come in and curse Mavis. So I've always been a tad confused about why that wouldn't affect the perfected law. Why, when Makarov uses fairy law, is he not affected? Makarov uses maybe I think the answer I came up with is that Makarov doesn't consider killing anybody. Like the first time we see him use fairy law is during the fight with Jose in Phantom Lord, and he doesn't kill Jose. Jose lives. All of Phantom Lord lives. Bunch of Phantom Lord joins Fairy Tail. So I guess because he wasn't even considering life and death in that instance, it didn't really count. I don't think for a second there was like maybe Angstrom. Maybe Makarov has the curse of Angstrom, but Makarov loves his children too much that if that were the case, he would have killed them already. He probably would have killed Acnologia at the end of Tenro, so I don't think that's right. So yeah, I think that it's just because it's perfected. It's good. But then that also brings into the grimoire law of Hades during the Tenro arc, because I feel like that was more intentionally trying to kill Fairy Tail. But for one thing, I forget exactly how that played out. If he never actually, I don't think he ever actually used the spell. And even if he did, I have some Hades theories I'll get into next week when we finish the flashback. That'll explain all of my thoughts on Hades, and it's a great theory I have cooking. You'll see that next week if there's a episode next week. If not, it'll be 2 weeks from now. I don't know. Anyway, with all this, Mavis goes home, back to the guild hall, and we briefly check in, and I mean like just a couple shots, with the present day cast after the commercial break, who seem to be taking the revelation their first master was at least on speaking terms with their arch nemesis surprisingly well. Like, and this is before they find out they were like lovers. But Mavis and Zareth were old friends, and they're just all kind of like staring, fairly stoically. I don't know, it's kind of weird to me. But then we have the second tragedy. Mavis kills Yuri's wife with her curse. And if Rita were were a character at all, she's never been seen before this scene. It still kind of gets you with just through Mavis's reaction and the slow dawning horror of like what Mavis is. It's still an affecting like gut punch. But I feel like if I don't know, we have been introduced in Zero to a love interest character for Yuri, and she had significant screen time, and then she ended up being the wife that Mavis killed. I feel like the scene would have worked a lot better, but whatever. It's Yuri's wife is a plot device to further Mavis's horror development along. Though something I noticed on this viewing is that Mavis assumes that she kills Rita with her curse, but I don't think she does. So Rita's death is so unlike what we see when Zareth's curse activates that I'm personally partial to the interpretation that she actually died a natural death in childbirth. That Mavis, spurred on by what she had just talked about with Zareth, Zareth's like, oh, you have the curse of Amsterdam. When you love people, they'll start to die. But Mavis interprets Rita's natural death as her own fault. Because whenever we see the curse, and even in the next scene after she runs away and we see her curse activate, it's a radius. It's a sphere centered around Mavis. When in the forest, all the creatures around Mavis die. When we first saw Zareth use the curse on Tenro, all the creatures around him died. And it wasn't like a specific you die and you die and you die, even like at random. It was just like a sphere around Zareth and a sphere around Mavis here. But we don't get that with Rita. It's particularly Rita who dies. And Rita, if Rita, if maybe the circle was just small enough that it only got Rita, that doesn't quite seem right to me because I don't know. It seems like even then we normally have some kind of visual effect when the curse activates. So honestly, I think Rita just died naturally, and Mavis thought that she did it. And that led her to run away, which actually was for the best because she did have the curse, and if she had grown to love Makarov in the way that like Rita had wanted, she might have killed Makarov, and then we wouldn't have a series. So I'm glad she misinterpreted Rita's death as her own fault, even if it's horrible for her. Um, and then we have a year passes. She's traveling the world, killing people left and right, she tells us. You know, as she passes through these towns, she can't stop loving. You know, because Mavis is at her heart a good person. Later on, or earlier on actually, Zareth comments that Mavis has like the potential to walk the same path as him. I think he's wrong. Zareth, as we learn when Mavis and Zareth eventually reunite in 697, views people as a simulation game. You know, it's how he can be around people and not kill them for so long because to him, the citizens of Alvarez aren't people. They're game pieces, and you don't give a shit about game pieces. You don't care about the pawn you sacrifice in chess. It's a pawn. It's a way. It's a means to an end. But you care about people. So if Zareth sees the 12 and the other citizens of Alvarez as pawns, he doesn't form connections to them. So I had a point. Where was I? Right. So when Zareth says that Mavis could be on the same path as him, he thinks that Mavis could one day see things as a simulation like he does. And maybe he's right. Maybe because I'll get into later the difference of like 1 year and 300 years is so vital to their final fates in this episode. But Mavis as she is in 696 and in 697 is not at that point yet. You know, she loves people, and even she'll go through these towns and she just keeps killing people because she still loves them so much. She has so much love in her heart that she can't stop, and that is what makes her different from Zareth. So yeah, that's my theory. That's my not a theory. It's a commentary on Mavis and Zareth's respective characters. But yeah. Anyway, moving on to the heart of this episode: the relationship between Mavis and Zareth. You know, as they point out, Mavis fully accepts Zareth, and Zareth loves her for that. And they are really the only ones who know what the other is going through, and that absolutely strengthens their bond. I do wish we got more time to spend with their bond because their whole relationship lasts maybe like 2 or 3 minutes. But honestly, I remember back in 2013, I think. I remember when Zervis was some crack ship that like no one took seriously. All we had was like the light and dark dynamic and the fact that Zareth was on the island of Mavis's grave, and that was it. And I was still like, oh, Zervis would be a great fucking couple. What if that was a thing? Imagine the tragedy there. And I never imagined we get this. I never imagined 5 years ago this would be canon. And so to see it here canon and now animated, oh god, even without the quality content of the episode, just seeing that would be worth it. And seeing Zareth finally get acceptance from Mavis for the first time in 300 years is some powerfully affecting stuff. I should have said this before, even with like the Rita stuff. The voice actors kill it this episode. They're so good. They're phenomenal. God, like the heart wrenching screams, the emotional, tears streaming down speeches. This episode kills it from a voice acting perspective. But as Mavis and Zareth share one long kiss, we have the final tragedy. The curse of Ankh does not fully make you immortal. as Mavis and Zareth thought, there is one thing that can kill someone with the curse of Ankh-Saram, and that is the curse of Ankh-Saram. And that'll be super important to a theory I'll get into next week or next episode, once we wrap up the flashback. So yeah, Zareth's love kills Mavis. So why didn't Zareth die too? And we never at any point get hard confirmation, but my opinion is simply that Zareth was so lonely for centuries. Mavis was lonely for a year, which is hard, especially when you're maybe 21. Spending a year killing everyone is like, seemed like the end of the world, but Zareth has been dealing with this shit for centuries. You know, so his love, after finally finding someone to accept him after 300 years, simply trumped Mavis's love after finding someone for 1 year. And so Zareth's curse was stronger, and so it killed Mavis, and he survived. And that's where the episode ends, with Mavis's body hitting the floor. And oof, I love them so much, and to see them go through this much pain breaks my heart. Breaks my fucking heart. But yeah, that's the end of Mavis and Zareth. So I've said this several times the past few weeks, but this is one of my favorite flashbacks in the entire series. It's not done yet. There is still, I think half of next week will be dedicated to wrapping up the flashback, and the next half will be prepping for the final war. But like Mavis and Zareth's utter loneliness in the entire world, how no one understands them, hurts every time. And then when they finally find some happiness, they instantly have it taken away by the same happiness. Like, curse of contradiction. The fucking curse of contradiction ties through everything so neatly in this story. You know? Do people still say the feels? It's 2018. People still say the feels. I still say the feels. The fucking feels of this episode. A fucking plus. Well, is what I would say. I do have a few complaints. I do really wish that Mavis and Zareth had spent more than 5 minutes together, both because it would have made their relationship more meaningful to see them, you know, actually spend time together, and because it would help some later reveals make more sense. That I'm not going to spoil anything, but there are some things we learn later that kind of makes the timeline. If this episode was a literal interpretation of what happened, like it's possible that Mavis skipped parts. You know, no matter how much time they spent together, the important part is that they loved each other and they died. And so Mavis telling this story only says we loved each other and then I died. So like maybe we just don't see it all. I'm open to that interpretation. But yeah, besides that, this episode was fucking stellar. You know, I love Mavis and Zareth. I love Mavis and Zareth so much. They're my favorite. I don't know if they're my favorite characters, but they're up there for my favorite characters. God, I love them so much, and they deserve the world. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. Next time, the flashback continues as the present-day fairies prepare for their final war with Alvarez and Acnologia. So yeah, I'm going to leave this video up here. Hope you all enjoyed the episode as much as I did, and the video as much as I enjoyed making it. And if you did, feel free to drop me a like or subscribe or fill out that straw poll down below, please, or do whatever the fuck you want. I don't really care. And as always, people, keep kicking ass, and I'll see you in the future. Bye!